Welcome to Tree Speech. I'm Jonathan Zautner. So, it was recently announced that the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn plans to become the first East Coast location to offer human composting, called natural organic reduction, as a legal, eco-friendly alternative to burial or cremation. And this news stopped me in my tracks. Turning a body into soil, not in some distant sci-fi way, but right now in a real place like New York City, seemed almost unfathomable. And as soon as I was able to wrap my head around it, I realized how disconnected most of us really are from death. We treat it like an abstract idea, something to sanitize and to control, filling coffins with chemicals and lining graves with materials that will never break down. We've built this whole system that separates us from a process the rest of the natural world participates in every single day. Now, human composting throws that separation into sharp relief. It's not about preservation, it's about return. This idea of return makes me think of the Billy Wilder film Sunset Boulevard, the classic, and the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical that it inspired, and the character of Norma Desmond, an actor in Hollywood who hasn't been seen for a while and who is planning to re-emerge into the world of film. And she exclaims that it's not a comeback, but it's a return to this place that's rightfully hers. That may seem kind of silly, but as I was thinking about the movie, I realized that our introduction to Norma Desmond, in both the movie and the musical, comes as she is having a funeral ceremony in her backyard for her pet monkey. And it's sort of seen as absurd that this little monkey is going to be buried in her yard in a coffin. And that got me to thinking, why is that so absurd? And this idea of putting chemicals and things that don't break down into the earth as humans, how is that different? How have we gotten to the place where we are seen as so different from the animals and creatures and all of the other aspects of our natural worlds? It really left me a lot to ponder. And once you start thinking in those terms, it's hard to see traditional burial as the only or even the best option. And today those options are growing as green burials become more and more prominent. For a burial to be considered green, there is no embalming of the body, there's no vault or concrete box in the grave, there's no permanent head marker, and all items being buried with the body are 100% biodegradable and locally sourced. Now, right now, with the vernal equinox arriving, this idea feels especially alive to me. Everything around us is waking up, it's feeding off of what came before, moving through cycles we can see if we just pay attention. Death can be part of that same rhythm as well. In today's episode, I'm talking with Mary Lauren Fraser, who weaves biodegradable coffins and burial vessels from willow branches, designed to break down naturally. Her work isn't about resisting decay, it's actually about working with it, and it opens up a bigger conversation about what we want death to mean, both for ourselves and for the world we leave behind. It's a conversation that may be a little uncomfortable, a little surprising, and a lot overdue. Let's listen. Well, hello, Mary. Welcome to Tree Speech. It's so nice to have you with us here today.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am going to start at the very beginning, and I'm wondering if you could begin by telling us what first drew you to basket weaving, and then how did that evolve into making willow caskets and burial trays?
I like how that question is phrased because a lot of people will ask, why did you want to make coffins?
I'm sure.
I'll be like, well, I was just drawn by the willow, really. Like it was sort of by accident. But to answer, I did a lot of outdoor programs as a kid, and I made one basket with dogwood,
Okay.
and the instructor was not a basket maker at all. We were all sort of making it up, and I enjoyed it, and then I completely forgot about it until I was 20 and I went to Scotland to just travel and play music primarily. So I play
Yes, and you played
fiddle.
the fiddle. Yes,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, so it's sort of an ancestral trip and also just for like the enjoyment of traveling alone and being 20 and like just such a good time in life to go get lost. And
Yeah, amazing. It sounds wonderful.
yeah, it was so fun. And being a musician, I could do it really cheaply because I just made friends and had places to stay and just wanted to play music and hitchhiked a lot. So I did it for traveling in the UK. I think I probably made a record of like traveling cheaply. And I happened to I was staying with a friend in Forres, which is like northeastern Scotland. It's right next to Findhorn, where the famous eco village is. And I was staying with a friend, and her roommate was tanning hides in my basket teacher's shop space in the pole barn where she worked. And so she told me about it, and I was like, whoa, that's so cool. She makes coffins, she makes willow baskets. And so then I went to visit, and I did like a day of work for her in exchange for, then I came back another day, and she taught me how to make a basket, and I just took to it. And the first day that we went, I walked in and there was a coffin in progress. And that's what really, it just really struck me. I like felt it in my bones. Just this impact and like, whoa, I want to do this. Just the beauty of it and I think the honesty of it. And then that connecting with like loving to do handwork. So I talked to her about apprenticing and she said yes. And so we went from there.
How long did that apprenticeship last then? How long did you study with her to learn this craft?
It was a little over 3 months full time, which was pretty short as far as Willow apprenticeships go. Like in Germany and France, they have 1 and 2 year long apprenticeships, and that's sort of like the professional track in Europe. Most basket makers will do those really intensive ones. But I really like I enjoyed making baskets, but what I really wanted to do once I got into it was the coffins. And
Yes.
so I felt in those 3 months that I learned that part of it, and I felt ready to come back to the States and do that, carry it on here. I felt this need to bring it home, sort of, or to
Yeah.
this other home. I felt very,
Yes.
I felt very at home in Scotland too.
Yeah. Well, and how amazing that sort of going there with your fiddle in hand, not necessarily having a destination or a plan in mind, led you to this life's work. It
Totally.
seems like it was synchronistic. It was meant to be.
It felt that way, big time.
It's powerful. For listeners who are unfamiliar with willow work, which is probably quite a few,
Yeah.
how would you describe the process of creating a willow casket from start to finish?
Well, the willow is all cultivated, so it's grown and it's varieties of willow that have been adapted, bred basically to be really good for basket making. There's
Mhm.
hundreds of varieties and they're cultivated, so they're grown in rows and then they're coppiced, which means all the new growth gets cut off every year. And you've probably talked about a lot about coppicing on this show.
Yes, we had Elspeth Hay on as a guest, and she took one of your classes, and it sort of
Yeah.
led to a lot of basket weaving, but we discussed that with her.
Yeah, I love Elspeth. I love the work that she's doing. And yeah, coppicing comes up with nut trees too.
Yes, yes.
A lot of tree cultivation techniques. So it's really good for the willow. It stimulates the growth, and it means that in 1 year you get this long rod that is doesn't have branches and is fairly straight. And because it's new growth, it's the most flexible that that plant will ever be. So it's really amazing material for basketry. It's almost like the plant evolved wanting to be a basket.
Right.
It's
Wow.
just, it's such an incredible plant and has tons of other uses. So that's sort of where it starts is with the willow cultivation, and then you harvest it and you sort it by length. You end up with these bundles, and you have to dry them for a minimum of 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And so they get cured, and people say drying or curing, and then you re-soak it in order to weave with it. So I use 5 to 7 foot long willow rods. They're pretty thick at the base, and on average, it's about a day per foot in length for soaking. So I'll put them in, and the 7 foot ones will take a week and a half up to 2 weeks, depending on like the variety and the temperature of the water. So then I take them out, I mellow them, I weave the coffin, the full coffins with the taller sides of like a foot tall on the side and a full lid, and they close and you don't see the body at all. Those take on average 35 hours to make.
Wow.
It's really intensive on the hands, so I do 3 to 4 hours tops per
Okay.
day of actual weaving. I will make the full coffins over like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then the trays, which are really popular, getting really popular, they have shorter sides, they're left open, so there's no lid. And I do like a raised kind of hood at the head end of it. It looks sort of like a baby's cradle with the
Hmm.
raised end. Those are maybe 2/3 of the time. And people for those will get wrapped in a shroud, often have flowers laid on them and boughs and whatever. And so it's more exposed.
While you are doing the weaving, are you listening to music? Is it sort of meditative? What is that experience for you?
It gets meditative sometimes. Like I think when I started this work, which was 10 years ago now, 11 years ago.
Yeah, right.
I'm starting to lose track. I think I was more like mentally conscious of, okay, I'm making this for a body to be laid in. I would think about the person I was making it for, or I would just, if it wasn't a specific order for someone, I would think about, okay, this is like gonna hold a body and carry them into the next phase. They'll decompose. And I thought about that level of it more. And now I feel like that's kind of assimilated and it's more in the subconscious. So yeah,
Sure.
I'll listen to music, I'll put on podcasts, I'll talk to myself.
Yeah. I wonder your thoughts on then, I know as a wood, that it lends itself well to weaving, but is there anything else that makes willow a special material for these burial vessels compared to other materials?
Yeah, the primary one I would say is that it's so fast growing that to make a coffin, it's 1 year's growth of a tree, and for willow starts to get to full production is like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So you plant the tree and then you have this stump that's producing every single year, and just 1 year's growth after that. And so compared to even pine, which is we consider like our one of our faster growing lumber trees in the
Yes.
Northeast, that's decades, and this is 1 year. So it's just highly sustainable, and it takes very little space to grow a lot of willow because they're growing a foot apart, whereas pines, need a lot more space. And I'm just using pine as a example. I think pine is a very sustainable wood to use as well, but I'm just sort of comparing it to another sustainable wood. So that's kind of the primary thing that I would think of. And then also for burial specifically, it's a really light wood and it's pithy, so it rots really quickly. It soaks up moisture quickly and then turns into soil really quickly and sequesters carbon in that way. But just that it's in the timeline of a body decomposing more so than a lot of like other wood, like board woods, wooden coffins. So I think from an environmental standpoint, but also just visually, like that brings on a strong visual of like, oh, a body and the basket that's holding it decomposing at the same rate together is a really beautiful visual to me and hopefully to other people.
It's really beautiful. And also, that sort of leads me into seeing its place within the broader green burial movement, which seems to be gaining traction as more and more people learn of these options for burial. I'm wondering, do you get asked a lot of questions? Are there some patterns of misconceptions that you think or see that people might have about green burial and biodegradable burial vessels?
Definitely, I like that. But yeah, patterns of misconceptions for sure. Like the most common question I get is, "Oh, I didn't know that was legal. It's not legal in every state, right? Or it's not legal in my town. You can't do that, right?" And so I do a lot of educating in my work with it's sort of the same five or so questions that people ask, and that's very near the top. And another is like, well, how much does that cost? Who do I have to pay to have that happen and have that? And the answers to those questions are it's legal in every state.
Yes. Mhm.
There's different rules per town, and there's options to bury on your own land or on a friend's land. And then there's more and more green cemeteries popping up. Every year there's more. Like the last 5 years has been this sort of a blooming of the whole movement. And so it's more and more available. It's definitely legal. And as far as payment, like it's free to do it on your own land. Some towns will require a perk test,
Okay.
so that's, 500 to $1,000. But a lot won't. They'll just want the Board of Health to come and approve the location, and then you put it on the deed, and it's fairly accessible. And then with green cemeteries, they cost between like 800 and $2,000 for a plot. So it's pretty accessible as far as funereal services go, and it's legal. And the other questions I get are who does that? Who prepares the body?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I ask? And smaller like family-run funeral homes are catching up really quickly because of the demand. So if you go to the family-owned funeral home in your town, they will probably by now this year, 2026, they'll have a lot of information and be able to
Yeah,
help you. But there's
that's
also
great.
this huge blooming culture of death doulas and home funeral guides and people like death midwives who will come to your home and help care for the body of your loved one and help the family prepare the body.
Right. It's really beautiful. I wonder, how have people in your local community responded to your work and the idea of green burial? Were they always open to it? Did they have these questions? Do you find yourself being sort of a fierce advocate or educator so that people understand?
I would say overall the community's been super excited and welcoming and encouraging and very supportive. And I love doing a work that connects me to community, like the Green Burial Cemetery in Montague. A neighbor of mine who I've known for 15 years is the sexton. So she and I like work together on burials sometimes or connecting families. There's just so many people who I have other relationship with through other contexts in the community, and then it comes up in my burial and death care work. And so it's really special. Here we are, like
Right. It sounds like the perfect place to be. On your website, it says that you will ship these coffins or burial trays to anywhere in the United States. Also, it's worth noting that they are large and hold, I think, up to 800 pounds. Is that right? So the Willow is very strong.
Yeah.
Now, beyond shipping, your website also notes that you hope to inspire weavers across North America to take up this craft as well. Can you talk
Mhm.
about what that vision means to you and what that would look like?
I've already had a couple of apprentices and I've taught a couple of classes in the burial trays. In the last 10 years, I've taught between 5 and 12 beginner basketry courses. And that's really where people need to start is like just making baskets. And it's a really intensive craft. It's very, it's highly skilled, so it takes a lot of training and a lot of learning. So it seems like the interest in learning basketry has really exploded in the last few years. Like my mailing list for basketry classes is like several hundred people just in the last 4 years. There's more, I think in the last 2 years, there's another like 4 people in the country who are weaving coffins.
Okay, wow.
And before that, it was three of us for like 5 years. And then there was two of us before that, and there was just me for the first couple years I was doing it. So it was like, oh, this is happening and it's growing and it's slow, but now it's quicker and people are interested and there's a demand for it. There's interest in it. So I think more people start doing it and I'm very happy to teach them. I honestly hate shipping and I've been thinking about taking it off of my website because I've only shipped, I think, 4 coffins total in the last 11 years. And it's also not as green. I mean, I ship them by freight, ground freight, so that's sort of the most environmentally like efficient way to do it. But my dream would just be for people to have like within driving distance a weaver they could go to. Be like, can you make me a coffin for my loved one?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
that's very slowly starting to happen.
Well, and thanks to you, you're really on the leading edge of the awareness of, like I said, the options for a greener, I think also a more spiritual and more intimate way to bury people. If someone is listening and they're sort of like this is the first time that they're hearing about this, or they want to dip their toes a little bit further into understanding this process or this method of burial, what advice would you give to someone who is considering a green burial for themselves or their loved ones? Where should they start? If they wanted to create their own with basket weaving, but if that's not an option, then what would you suggest people do?
Great question. I usually first send people to the Green Burial Council because they have a great website that has both all of the green burial laws per state, but they also have they have a list of all of the green cemeteries per state. So you can go to the website and find your state and get a lot of information on where to start. And then there's a lot of like death doula networks on Facebook, and there's some websites too. So those sorts of forums and lists are pretty easy to find. For makers of burial vessels, Lee Webster, who's a really, really amazing green burial advocacy worker, she's based in New Hampshire and has just worked in green burial for decades and really made a lot of things happen. So she and I made a website, and it's called the Funerary Artisans Collective, and there's a interactive map on the homepage, so you can like find where you
Mm.
are in North America. It includes Canada too, so you can find where you are and find the closest makers of burial vessels, and it includes urns too. So if you're doing cremation, you can find crafts, small business craft people on that
Right.
website.
We'll include links to all of these things. And that's a great point as well, that you could still have a green burial, but it doesn't necessarily have to incorporate a woven casket. It's nice to know that there's resources that people can go to, and there are options. And I'm sure that there will be more and more options as we need to get away from chemicals and from those big,
Yeah,
expensive heavy caskets and all those horrible
totally.
materials going into the ground. But I am so glad that you took that trip to Scotland once upon a time with your fiddle and sort of stumbled into this and have brought these methods and this awareness to this country, and how exciting that it's growing and starting to take a life of its own with the people that have studied with you and with other people, including our listeners who are inspired by your artistry and craft as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mary. This has really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope I inspired some people to look it up and think about their death and what their internment, because it's scary, but it can also be really empowering and beautiful. Like, and it's okay for all those things to exist at the same time. To be like nervous about like, oh yeah, right, I am gonna die someday, and maybe it's worth thinking about that, and feel nervous about it, and also be like, well, what's the most empowered way to do this, or what's the most friendly to the things I care about, my backyard, the natural world, or like, or someone who's really passionate about trees, like probably a lot of your listeners are really passionate about trees. And so this could be really inspiring. And I think that's sort of what I want listeners to know, is like it's okay to feel nervous and uncomfortable and also have excitement and curiosity about things and to do with death.
Well, you have definitely inspired us, and that's true. I think, all new ways of thinking take a little time to become comfortable, but definitely through your work, I think that one step at a time sort of eases people's nervousness and promotes just a much more sustainable and, as you said, beautiful way to embrace death, to acknowledge it, and to know that we're doing good for the earth and sort of the legacy of generations to come as well.
I love that. Yeah, thank you so much. And I love your show. Thank you so much for your work as well.
It's been a pleasure. A big thank you to Mary Lauren Fraser for sharing her knowledge and her passions. It's left me inspired and thinking quite differently. We'll include links to her website and the other sites we talked about in our show notes so you can explore for yourself. From human composting to memorial forests, even mushroom coffins, there are so many ways we can return to the earth with care. It's made me realize that the choices we make, even in death, can ripple out and matter. And honestly, that gives me a sense of hope. that how we live and how we leave can be part of something bigger than ourselves. I know our very own Dori Robinson has been thinking along similar lines, and I'm excited for her to share her reflections. Because as nature stirs with the first signs of spring, it's easy to see only new life. But if we look closer, there's a deeper truth. This season of growth is inseparable from the cycles of death that make it possible.
After hearing about the careful weaving of willow caskets and the quiet craft of preparing a body to return to the earth, I find myself thinking about cycles. Not the cycles we track on calendars or planners, but the older ones, the ones the land keeps whether we notice them or not. Around this time of year, the earth passes through a subtle threshold known as the vernal equinox, that moment when day and night briefly share the sky in perfect balance. For a short while, light and darkness stand equal, and then almost imperceptibly, the balance tips. Daylight begins its slow and steady return. You can see that turning most clearly in the trees. If you've been walking through a forest in late winter, you may have noticed that the trees appear quiet, almost withdrawn, their branches bare, their energy drawn down into the roots. But inside those trunks, deep beneath bark and cambium, something is already shifting. Sap begins to move again. The long stillness of winter begins to loosen, and the trees slowly prepare themselves for another season of leaf and light. But the deeper wisdom of this moment is not simply about beginnings, but rather about continuity, because nothing truly begins without something else ending. Every spring leaf is made possible by the fallen leaves that came before it. Every towering tree depends on the slow work of decomposition happening beneath the forest floor. The soil itself is an archive of endings, roots, branches, fungi, insects, all slowly transforming into the nutrients that sustain new growth. In forests, death is not the opposite of life. It is part of the system that allows life to continue. A fallen tree becomes what ecologists call a nurse log. Over time, it softens and breaks down, feeding moss, fungi, insects, and seedlings. New trees often take root directly in that decaying wood, growing upward from what once stood before them. Life continues, but it changes form. In many ways, green burials acknowledged this ancient pattern. Rather than trying to halt or disguise the natural process that follows death, it allows the body to participate once more in the ecology of the earth with simple materials: woven willow, untreated wood, natural fibers, and the slow, patient work of soil and time. In this way, a green burial is not only an environmental choice, but a philosophical one. It reminds us that we are not separate from the cycles we admire in forests. We are made of the same elements as the trees, the same carbon, the same minerals, the same borrowed sunlight transformed through living systems. For much of modern life, we've grown used to imagining death as something that must be hidden away or managed out of sight. But the forest offers another story. In a forest, decay is not failure. Decay is transformation. When we allow ourselves to see it that way, something subtle shifts. The fear softens just a little. Because if everything is part of a cycle, then nothing truly disappears. Matter changes form, energy moves, life continues in ways we may not see, and there is a strange kind of comfort in that, especially now. Many of us are living through a moment that feels uncertain, socially, politically, environmentally. There is a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, and sometimes a sense that the ground beneath us is shifting. Spring arrives whether we are ready for it or not. Sap rises, buds swell at the tip of branches. The forest wakes up. There is reassurance in remembering that these cycles are older than any of our current anxieties. Trees have been practicing renewal for millions of years. Season after season, loss gives way to growth. Dormancy gives way to blossoming. Perhaps that is one of the quiet gifts of thinking about green burials. It invites us to imagine ourselves as participants in that same long story, to recognize that we too return to the soil that nourishes future life. What ends becomes the conditions for something new, and spring is the season when we begin to see that transformation again. Life returns not because it defeated death, but because it moved through it. So wherever you are listening from today, perhaps take a moment to notice the trees around you. Look closely at their branches. See if you can spot the small, swelling bud that hold this year's leaves. They have been waiting there all winter, quietly preparing for the light to return. And now, just as they have for thousands of years, they are beginning once again to unfold.
Thank you, Dori, and thank you to our guest, Mary Lauren Fraser. Happy spring, everyone, and thank you for listening to Tree Speech today.
Only asking. I didn't know you were planning a comeback.
I hate that word. It's a return. A return to the millions of people who've never forgiven me for deserting the screen.